As you're talking now about the next % of growth in your growth plan, you're facing much more portfolio complexity than you originally did. You've got more markets, more adjacencies, more product lines, more service offerings, and that creates complexity. You then try to organize around that and create organization complexity. And there's lots of debates about how to organize best to capture all these adjacent opportunities. And then people try to resolve them with grand ideas about what we'll do better with IT and information flows, and we create process complexity. And as one CEO of a company said, and then what happens is that complexity creates dissonance within the management team, which is its own complexity. And so a good day at the office is suddenly we've aligned. People stop talking about acting and doing anything, but they're very, very content that they've at least aligned. But the problem with complexity, it gets companies exhausted. Decisions and conflicts aren't being resolved. You give rise to the energy vampire. And the energy vampire are those people in the organization sucking the life out of your talent and people by constantly blocking their action. And then that leads to exhausted leaders. And then what happens, and I see this all the time in companies, is those leaders forget to do the one thing that leaders have to do, which is to simplify and try to deliver a strategy and a plan of action that is simple, but it takes massive energy to focus and be simple. So a lot of what we talk about is how do you strip that down again? How do you get back to where the lines are simpler? And I found it fascinating that when Tim Cook was asked shortly after Steve Jobs died, what is the one thing you learned from Steve Jobs? His answer was, I learned focus is key. So this is the journey we're on as we think about it. And a lot of the work we're doing is with insurgents and figuring out with them how to take a path north. And if I'm a large multinational incumbent right now, I'd be very frightened. Because if these guys can figure out a path north where they're gaining the benefits of the founder mentality and they're scaling, they are going to be formidable competitors. But the other journey we're on is how do we take struggling bureaucracies, incumbents, and get them to rediscover this founder's mentality. And often it's finding what was great at the company in their early history, rediscovering the elements of the insurgency and bringing them back in. And the final path of how you do this is actually quite fascinating. A lot of companies now are thinking about their partners as a means to bring back in the founder mentality. So it used to be automatically, if you think about acquiring a company, your first job is to make it into yourself. And we are now seeing CEOs hesitate and say, actually, if I acquire a founder-led company, why don't I want that mentality to actually influence me? And so these are the three paths we're exploring as we think now about how insurgents or how incumbents grow sustainably and profitably by maintaining this founder's mentality.